Hi everybody, welcome to today's lesson. It's great that you could join us today. For anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Naomi. I'm an English teacher from England in the UK. And I'm currently teaching you here from England, from a place called Derbyshire. So, again, for anybody who hasn't joined my classes before, this is part of an ongoing series on IELTS. So we're looking mostly at IELTS technique, and we're looking at kind of at easy things to improve your score a lot. When you're learning actual English grammar and proficiency, vocabulary, these are things that take a longer time to build, but the techniques we're looking at today can kind of very quickly help you to improve your score on the IELTS test. Hi to anybody that is joining us now. You're so welcome, wherever you're from. So today's lesson, what are we going to be talking about? We're going to be looking at speaking. Now, this lesson today is going to be looking specifically at common mistakes that students make in the IELTS exam, in the speaking part. But even if you're not going to do the IELTS exam, this will be really, really helpful for your speaking level, okay? But in general as well, these are mistakes that almost every student will commit one of these mistakes, so it's great to be aware of them. Welcome to everybody that's joining us today. Just going to share my presentation with you. So in another previous lesson, somebody actually asked me, what is IELTS? Very good question. IELTS just stands for the International English Testing, English Language Testing System. Yeah, so what we need to remember in this test is, okay, why are we doing it? We're doing it because you want to go to uni or university, or you want to work in an English-speaking country, and the test is just checking that you have a good level of English to help you do that. So not anything to be worried about. Let's get started and look at the IELTS speaking. So, as you can see, this is two lovely friends speaking together, not at all scary, a nice conversation. What do you have to do? What do you have to do in IELTS speaking? This will help us to think about the common errors that we can avoid, right? We looked at this in quite a lot of detail yesterday, but we'll just go over that briefly today. Hi, everybody who's joining us now. Great to have you with us. So speaking and listening are the same for academic and general. They're the same. So we're just doing one speaking lesson today. We don't need to do two different things. Okay. So structure of the speaking exam, how long is it? It's 11 to 14 minutes. 11 to 14 minutes, not too long, about the length of a normal conversation, yeah? Part 1 is general introductory questions. What topics do you think they might talk about in part 1? What topics do you think they could be? They're often about your family, the place where you're from, your hometown, often about your studies, your interests, your hobbies, what you work in. These kind of basic background facts about yourself. These are the kind of things you will have to talk about. So it's good to already prepare your speaking on each of these topics and to be confident that you can speak about your hobbies, your studies, and where you're from in a confident way. Yeah, those are good ideas. Hi to Hairi from Kurdistan. Wow. Hi to everybody in all these different countries. It's amazing. Any other questions, comments you have, you can just put them in the comment section there. So moving on to part 2. You've already warmed up. You've already talked about maybe where you're from, your interests. Now this part is talk on a specific topic. So you're given a card, a bit of paper that will have a specific topic on it, might have a few questions. We looked at some examples yesterday. Maybe we might be able to look at a few more today if that would be helpful. Yeah, so this one, you have 1 minute to prepare and then 2 minutes to give your presentation. So part 2 is where you have to do what we call a monologue. Yeah, kind of monologue where you will have to talk for 2 full minutes on this topic. Now, 2 minutes doesn't seem like a long time, but it can actually be quite difficult. So make sure you practice this one a lot at home. I know that I'm speaking for a whole hour today, but I do find that difficult, and I do lots of practice of that as well. And it's my mother tongue, right? So when it's in a language that isn't your mother tongue, of course, that's a little bit different again. So after this 2-minute talk, what's part 3? Part 3 is further questions on the same topic. There'll be questions related, and in the final part, you will get quite conceptual, maybe philosophical questions, which maybe are not directly related. So expect really any question at the end. It really can be very unrelated, okay? But don't worry. Like I said yesterday, these are all topics which are kind of designed to affect everybody. So the people that make the exam will only choose topics they think that anybody in the world is affected by, and that the vast majority of people will already have come across that topic. Okay, so I have lots of students asking me, but what if I get a topic that I don't know anything about? Then what do I do? Don't worry, these topics are really designed for you to know something about them. They're very general topics which should affect kind of people all over the world. Things like the environment, shopping, advertising, something that you find you're important, and it's linked to you very personally. So especially in the speaking, you can bring in a lot of personal examples. That is absolutely fine. In fact, it is recommended. So this is your chance to really use your own personal experience there. Okay, that's a bit about the structure. See, I'm already getting thirsty. It's only been 10 minutes. Any questions about the structure? You can just put that in the comments there. I'm just going to get rid of some of... In fact, no, I think this is helpful, so I'll leave this. So here we're just seeing how will I be marked. To really get those high band scores, it's important that you know what the examiner is looking for, right? Because you want to do what the examiner wants, basically. So what does the examiner want? First thing, there are only 4 things here. I know it looks like a big list, but they're just little explanations. They're 4 things. First one, fluency and coherence. So fluency is avoiding long pauses, making sure that your ideas are linked, that your sentences use nice connecting words. And then coherence is making sure that your ideas are organized, that the content is in a logical order. So that's the first thing, fluency and coherence. Next one, lexical resource. So lexical resource just means vocabulary. The words that you use need to be related to the topic. We have a question here from Najib. Thank you for your question. Najib says, could we divert from the main topic to speak about a linked one which we master? Very good question. So Najib is asking, for example, maybe I get the topic of sports, but I'm not a very sporty person. This is true. I'm not a very sporty person. Okay, so maybe I get that topic and I think, oh no, I'm not very sporty. I'm not very passionate about this. What can I talk about instead? You want to make sure, first of all, Najib, you need to make sure you're answering the question. So even if maybe you don't like sport or whatever the topic is, we do need to answer the question. So maybe the question is, what is your favorite sport? Or, do you enjoy sport as a hobby in your free time? Then, of course, you can be totally honest. You can say, to be honest, as a child, I really enjoyed netball, but as I grew older, I started to focus my free time more on music or on learning languages. So essentially, just be honest, be yourself. You're having a conversation, answer the question, and if you have a related topic that you know a lot about, it would be good to mention that, but make sure you're answering the question. So if part 2, which is where you have to create a presentation, we looked at an example yesterday, which said, talk about something you own which is important to you. Talk about something you own which is important to you. Now, this topic is designed so that you can talk about anything, basically. So you can talk about literally anything that you own. Even if you don't own it, you can just pretend that you do. The examiner doesn't know if it's true or not. And in that way, it's kind of designed for you to be able to speak about what you're interested in. So definitely talk about related topics if they're relevant, but the main thing is answer the question. Yeah, even if you don't like the question, you have to answer it, unfortunately. I hope that's helpful, Najib. Any other questions, please just leave them in the comments. So the third thing you're marked on is grammar. This is something that you build up over time. Make sure that you include advanced structures. Make sure that you include advanced tenses, like conditionals, the perfect tenses, some nice connecting words. I suppose that would be more vocabulary, wouldn't it? And then the last one is pronunciation. Students often get a bit worried about this. They think, oh, my accent is not very good and I don't sound very native. You do not need to sound like a native speaker. Okay, first myth. You do not need to sound like a native speaker. The only thing you do need to do is make sure that the examiner can understand you. That is the only thing you are tested on. The examiner needs to understand you. And this is very important in pronunciation, but students often get confused between having an accent, which is totally normal, always happens, and actually having pronunciation which stops people from understanding you. That is problematic. That is where points will be taken off you. And it's a very common thing. So maybe one or two words you might pronounce a little bit differently and the examiner won't understand you. You might have just a very minor reduction in marks. But this is why it's very important to constantly be checking the pronunciation of new words that we learn. Some examples that we looked at yesterday were these 4 words: bear, beer, bird, and beard. They all sound really similar, but they mean different things. So we want to make sure we're making those differences. A bear, that animal, beer, what we drink. A bird, a flying animal, and a beard, what men grow on their face. Those are just some examples of pronunciation issues that students sometimes find difficult. So, next one. Sorry, I'm just reading some of the comments. Chetan says, I'm from India. Could you tell me, is it necessary to use formal words while speaking, or do we just have to use informal words? I'll make sure you have the verb in use. Have to use informal words. Thanks, Chetan. Well, this is a very good point. In general, when you're speaking, we use less formal language than when we're writing. Just repeat that again. When we're speaking, we use less formal language than when we're writing. That's a general rule. But especially if you're talking about a topic that is a bit more serious, or maybe in your presentation, you want to use linking words like however, therefore. But these words are often used more in written English than spoken English. So actually try not to use words that are very, very formal in the spoken part, would be my suggestion. We will actually talk about this in more detail in a minute. So I hope that's helpful. Great. Just gonna do this one. Oh. So I think we maybe have, there we go. So I'm just going to share my screen with you again. I just needed to get my notes up there, so that's why. That was paused for a second there. So going on to the main part of this lesson, we're looking at the 10 most common mistakes in IELTS speaking. Yeah, the 10 most common mistakes in IELTS speaking. What do you think these mistakes are? What do you think these mistakes are? If you have any ideas, leave your ideas in the comments and I'll be happy to go over them. If you have any questions, also please leave them in the comments. Let's get started. What is number 1? Letting your nerves control you. Letting your nerves control you. This affects so many people, and it sounds like, it sounds like an obvious thing, but it's very, very important. So many candidates will get too nervous and it really affects their performance. So there are a few techniques that you can use to help master your nerves, to help reduce the impact that they have. So, the best way that you can stop your nerves getting in the way of your performance, the best thing you can do, in my opinion, is do lots of practice spoken tests under timed exam conditions. Yeah, do lots of practice spoken tests. Now, it's important that you do this under exam conditions because maybe at home you might, sometimes it's good to do practice tests with your material next to you, yeah? Letting yourself use your phone, searching words. This can improve your vocabulary and your spoken skills when you're preparing. But it's also very important to do timed tests under exam conditions. So put your phone away, your books away, put a timer on for however long, 14 minutes, right? Or you can do it by sections. Then get somebody to ask you the questions. You can find lots of past papers online. Just get somebody in your family, even if they don't speak English, to read out the questions. If that's obviously ideal, if you live alone or you don't have anybody that can do that for you, then just get the past papers online and read the questions, yeah? Obviously, it's better if somebody else reads them to you and then it's like a real conversation, right? And make sure that you have your timer on, that they are only reading the questions on the paper. And another good tip is to record those mock tests. Yeah, recording those mock tests is really good because you can then listen back and do what we call self-appraisal. So you can listen back and check for any mistakes. You can evaluate your own performance. You can even give yourself a fake mark. You can say, what you can do is actually use these for areas that you will be marked on. You can listen to it and think, was I pausing for a long time? Were the sentences relating to each other? Did I use appropriate vocabulary? And that can help you. Another thing, on the test day, so that's preparing for the test, right? You've done lots of practice tests. On the actual test day, you want to acknowledge the nerves. It's normal to get nervous. It means that you care about the exam. That's good. But you want to visualize a good interview. So before you go into that room and start talking with the examiner, visualize in your head and imagine yourself speaking exactly how you want to speak. Visualize yourself entering the room, greeting the examiner, answering questions confidently, and walking out of the room smiling. Positive thinking. Yeah. If you do meditation or any kind of mindfulness techniques, those can be very useful as well in these situations. It's also good to have breathing techniques. I know that when I'm nervous, I make sure that I take lots of big breaths. And just be aware that the examiner is not there to trick you. He or she wants you to do well. They want you to get a good score, and they won't be asking things that are not on their sheet. So they won't be suddenly asking very unrelated questions or extremely difficult things which they have thought up. No, they'll be sticking to the test. Okay. So essentially that positive thinking, deep breathing, and acknowledging the nerves. The likelihood is you will be nervous, but we need to find a way to get over that. So next one. What's the next one? Giving memorized answers. Giving memorized answers. Students are often tempted to do this, but it is very obvious when you do this, and it sounds very bad. So I'm going to give you an example that I have. The examiner asks, so what is the climate like where you live? What is the climate like where you live? The candidate says, where I live, there are 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. In spring, the weather is temperate and mild. In summer, the weather is hot, humid, and rainy. In autumn, the leaves fall down. In winter, it is cold. It doesn't sound natural. It sounds very memorized. And you're not really responding in a natural way. The examiner doesn't want a description of all the characteristics. He just wants a natural response. So what are good things to memorize? Good things to memorize are words and phrases. Short things, words and phrases. But reciting whole answers is not good for IELTS. The examiner wants to see that you can use language flexibly, that you can take small words and phrases and move them about, use them as building blocks to create sentences. So, yes, memorize phrases, idioms, words, collocations. Fantastic. No, don't memorize whole sentences, whole stories. So, good way to practice this is practice speaking from bullet points. Yeah? So, in your notes, for example, maybe you're practicing for part 2, where you have to give the presentation. In your notes, maybe you have a few notes, a few bullet points. So you can practice creating a 2-minute speech based on those bullet points. Probably it's not a good idea to write out a whole full answer in full sentences and recite it back. You want to get used to reading from notes and creating sentences based on those notes. The general rule behind that is just to practice being flexible. Practice being flexible, yeah? Because you don't know exactly what the examiner will ask. So you need to be prepared to use all of these wonderful different words that you have to build together a sentence that is relevant and directly responds to the examiner's question. So another example of something you can do. Take a sentence and practice changing the tense. Maybe you have the sentence. Let's do an example of this. Let's do it. Oh, you've seen the next one. Pretend you haven't seen that. So maybe I have the sentence. I find it very difficult to practice sport on a regular basis. Okay, I find it very difficult to practice sport. I'm just going to make this nice and big so that you can see it. And let's make the presentation bigger. Great, so I find it very difficult to practice sport on a regular basis. Now let's practice changing this into a different tense. Why don't we try it in the present perfect? Now, what is the present perfect? Can anyone remember? How do we form the present perfect? How do we form the present perfect? Have or has plus past participle. Have or has plus past participle. So the example of this sentence that we can do is this down. We have the main sentence. I find it very difficult to practice sport on a regular basis. Let's change it into the present perfect. So we want to use have. And what's the past participle of find? Found. I have found it very difficult to practice sport. I might even want to try changing other things. So instead of on a regular basis, I'd say regularly. I'm just practicing changing up those sentences depending on the situation. Now, in this case, so that you can all see, I've written it down. But when you practice, don't write it down, just say it, because we're practicing the speaking, aren't we? Maybe you can make a note afterwards, but we want to practice changing it quickly in spoken English. Right, I think that might be everything I have to say on that point. Yeah, I think so. So again, I keep saying this, but get yourself a speaking buddy, a partner. This can be a friend, someone in your family, anybody that you know. Doesn't have to be a native speaker. And practice asking each other different questions, just about anything, and responding to those questions. Okay, number 3, giving short answers. So this happens all the time. This happens in lessons as well. And especially in your exam, this is the worst thing you can do. Example. The examiner says, do you like shopping for clothes? The candidate responds, no, not really. You're giving nothing to the examiner. You're not helping him in the discussion at all. Although this is a conversation, what's the point of the exam? The point of the exam is for you to show that you have that fantastic advanced English. So develop your answers. So always give a reason for what your answer is. You can say, no, not really. At the moment, I'm particularly concerned for the environment and I'm trying to reduce my shopping, particularly of non-essential items. I also find the atmosphere of a shopping mall quite stressful, so I try to avoid those environments. Yeah, just an example of how you can speak a long time about a small topic. This is what you have to do in the IELTS. So, what do short answers have? Low levels of vocabulary, simple structures, they don't show fluency, and they don't show intonation or pronunciation across longer sentences. Those are the 4 things that you're being marked on, right? So all of those 4 skills you're not showing if you do short answers. So you kind of want to have a balance of long and short answers, but mostly long. So especially for part 3, take a few risks. Try those complex sentences, try those conditional tenses. Don't use language far above your actual level, but this is a chance to show those idioms as well that you know, those great connecting words, complex sentences. Great idea. Okay, next one. Not listening to the question. Okay, we have a few questions. I'm just going to pause and answer some questions. So Chetan is saying, when do we have to learn accent? If you're asking how to learn accents, it's a gradual thing, Chetan. So you can download something called a phonetic alphabet. This gives you all the different sounds that you can find in the English language. And when you find a new word, you can search in the dictionary, Cambridge Dictionary Online, for example, and press the little sound button, and you will hear what the word sounds like. You can practice it yourself, record yourself saying that. There are lots of little exercises online that you can do to improve your accent. But remember, the only time that an accent is a problem is if it stops understanding. As if it stops understanding. Yeah. Monish is saying, are the colloquial terms good for the speaking part? Yes, Monish. In a word, yes. You can use idioms, you can use informal language. Just make sure that you're not using too much slang. You want to make sure that every time you learn slang, that you understand what kind of level of language it is. So for this conversation, I would say it is a semi-formal to informal conversation. Semi-formal to informal. So colloquial terms are good, but nothing too obscure, or of course nothing that could be offensive or that is not appropriate for a semi-formal conversation. Okay, great. Mohammed is asking if his sentences are correct. Where have you been? That is correct, Mohammed. I have been outside. Yes, that is a good answer and question. But the questions and answers in your IELTS speaking test will normally be about more general topics. So not what you are doing exactly today and whether you were outside before the exam, but you're normally talking about more general topics. So they might say, where do you live? Or where are you from? Or what kind of accommodation do you live in? So more general things. Yeah. Okay, so not listening to the question. This is quite self-explanatory. And this can be a result of nerves, or maybe you're not familiar with the accent. You can ask the examiner to rephrase the question or repeat the question. Yeah? So that's a good thing to do if you haven't understood. Listen for keywords, but make sure that you're not just hearing the first word and responding for that. So, an example. The examiner says, so, tell me about your neighbourhood. What's it like? The candidate says, yes, I like my neighbours a lot. We get on well. So first of all, you're answering yes, which is not directly related to the question. The question says, tell me about your neighbourhood. What's it like? Tell me about your neighbourhood. So maybe you can say that there is a school near you, that is a very green area, or that you live in a city or a town. Make sure that you're directly responding to that question. This is why it's good to do lots of practice exams as well. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So, people might be surprised by this, but using too many connectives. This is a common mistake, And students will think that if they memorize long phrases or big connectives, it will get them higher marks, but it can actually be a negative thing. So basically what you want to do, instead of using long memorized connectives, you want to use simple connectives. Simple ones, like, let's write these down actually. You can use simple connectives like, I'm getting a bit lost here. Excellent, okay, good. So, and, but, then, first, in the end. These are good connectives. Okay, you can also use some more complex ones. I'll tell you what the mistake is in a minute, so don't worry. Some more complex ones. For example, first of all, or progressing to the next point. Or, for example, if I had to talk about anything, maybe sport, I would choose. These are good phrases and connectives, but the thing you want to avoid is using too many. Okay, don't use too many. This can sound really unnatural. So use some short sentences, some long sentences, some short connectives, and some long ones. But in one answer, as a general rule, don't use more than two, and don't always use the same ones. So we don't want to always say, however, therefore, or whatever it is. We want to make sure that we're using a wide range of connectives. Yeah, okay. So next common mistake is, sorry, I'm just getting rid of this. There we go. So the common mistake number 6 is not using the 1 minute preparation time well. Not using the 1 minute preparation time well. Which part of the exam is this in? Which part of the exam is this in? This is in part 2 of the exam. Part 2 of the exam. So sometimes students will get so nervous that they want to start talking straight away. But I rarely see anybody do well who starts straight away. So use the preparation time. Use the preparation time. So use 1 minute to practice preparing a question you have just looked at. Use 1 minute to practice preparing a question you've just looked at. You can practice with as many part 2 questions as possible and practice preparing for them and giving an answer for them. Same as ever, do it under timed conditions, exam conditions. Then when you're in the exam, you can use mind maps. This is a mind map, I'll show you. So a mind map is when we do this. For example, yeah, I'm thinking about This is a mind map. It can be, oh, sorry, my thing is so small, isn't it? Make myself a bit bigger. Just something like this. You can use these, or you can use bullet points to note down your ideas. And that is super helpful. That looks so messy, sorry. That is very helpful to make sure that you have a nice prepared bit of material when you start speaking. Yeah, because you don't want to start speaking with no preparation. And even before you start preparing, take a deep breath. You have lots of time. Don't worry. Just note down your main points. In this part, it's good to have a structure. So start with an introduction, maybe then main point, second point, and conclusion or summary. So good to note down the structure like this. So I don't know if you can see there, but I have my introduction. I have my main point, second point, and summary. I'm just noting that down. Use the 1 minute, breathe, and then you'll be so ready for for when you have to speak. Okay, next one. Just going to check if we've got any questions here. Hi to everybody that is joining now. We're looking at techniques for the IELTS speaking, specifically common errors, common mistakes. Okay. Monish, I don't think I understand your question. In order to giving reason, instead of the reason behind, or because, can I use let me make you clear? No, we have to say let me be clear. Let me be clear. We wouldn't say make you clear, we'd say let me be very clear. Okay, hope that's helpful. But I wouldn't use this. This is only if a kind of misunderstanding has happened or you need to clarify something. You can say, let me be very clear. I do love sport. I just don't have time for it. You're making it something clear. But when you're first introducing a reason, then you could use a different phrase like, this is because, or it is for this reason that, or something like that. Okay. Okay, so going off topic. Going off topic is very, very tempting. Lots of students want to do it because they get a topic that they don't like and they want to talk about something they are more interested in instead. Not a good idea. We had a question earlier today asking if you get a topic that you don't know much about, can you start talking about a linked topic? You can, but only if it is related to the main question. Only if it helps you to answer the main question. If not, don't mention it. You need to answer the question. So, for example, examiner, good afternoon. Can you tell me your full name, please? Candidate, hey, what's up? Sure, I love to go to the cinema and I love reading, which is actually one of my favorite hobbies. I have read so much in my, whoa. What is the examiner asking? He is literally asking what your name is. He's literally asking what your name is. So we don't need to talk about other things. Another example for you. The examiner says, are unemployed people given enough support in your country? Candidate, yes, most companies have training programs for staff, including health and safety, leadership, and team building. So companies look after their employees quite well. Whoa. What's the question? The question is, are unemployed people given enough support in your country? So I'm talking about unemployed people, not people that have a job. So we want to make sure that we're really listening to the question and then answering that question, specifically what they're asking, not something that I want to talk about. This can happen very often, if a candidate misunderstands. This is common, so listen for keywords, but take time to understand. Don't just hear companies and start talking about companies. No, what does the examiner actually want? Second is when they try to fit a memorized answer to a question. Don't memorize answers. The questions will be different every time. So you can't memorize answers. You need to be able to be flexible. Okay, so it's important in this sense to work on your listening skills. Ask the examiner to repeat the question and expand your vocabulary for less familiar topics. So for topics that you don't know much about, give it a search, find some new vocabulary, and practice using that. Ask yourself some questions, invent some answers, and that should work really well. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Rambling. What is rambling? Next mistake. Rambling is talking without structure. Rambling is talking without structure. So, for example, the examiner says, so, do you work or are you a student? The candidate says, I am working. Well, not exactly a job. I've worked for a while, kind of, more of a part-time job. I like to study, but work most of the time. But then sometimes I study in the evenings. But actually, recently, I've started, it's very confused. Take a minute, breathe in. Breathe in. Think about what you're going to say. He's asking, do you work or do you study? Breathe. And I can say, well, actually, I do both. I am working full-time, but I am studying to learn Italian and I'm studying to pass my driving test. Okay, so you just breathe deeply, choose one thing to say first. Don't worry about it being perfect, just choose one thing to say first, one thing to say second. Nice, simple structure. If you ramble, so just blurt out what you're thinking, just say what you're thinking, it gives a bad impression and it can affect your fluency. It can affect your fluency. So you want to make yourself look clear and confident. And if you're clear and confident, you use a good structure and you have a clear layout. So especially for part 2, use your 1 minute well to prepare the presentation. Think about the structure and learn some time fillers. Learn some time fillers, things in English like, let me think, or, let me see, or, that's a good question. I have some Spanish-speaking students who will often say, pues, bueno, make sure you learn those little words, but in English. So you can say, or, These are good English ways of filling a gap. You can say, let me think. Good ways of filling a gap, yeah? Okay, next one, we have 2 left. Not understanding what the examiner is evaluating. So this is actually very relevant to what Monish was asking. He was asking about colloquial expressions. So it's good to avoid slang. Just like we were saying before, this is semi-formal to informal. It's kind of semi-formal to informal. So you don't want to use very casual slang or colloquial expressions or very fancy, advanced academic expressions. You want to use something in the middle, a neutral tone. Similarly, with your accent, you don't need to put on a fake British or American accent like this. You can use your own accent. Your pronunciation just needs to be understandable. Yeah, but you can use your own accent, that's fine. So, for example, examiner says, "Good afternoon. Can you tell me your full name, please?" The candidate says, "Hey bro, sure, what's up? My name is Alistair, aka Ali, although my closest mates refer to me as Al." So you're talking about nicknames there. You're saying, "What's up?" Very colloquial. So make sure that you know some semi-formal language, which will really help you. Okay, last one, trying to have a conversation with the examiner. The examiner is there to test you. So it's like an interview. The interviewer cannot answer your questions because he or she needs to ask questions. So this technique will not work. Just answer the questions. Don't worry if it seems a bit unnatural. Okay, I think that was everything for today. Thanks so much for joining the lesson today. I hope it's been useful, and I will see you next week at 3 p.m, I think, on Thursday or Wednesday. Great, so have a lovely day, everybody, and see you soon. Bye.